With us today is the Honorable Harvey Robbins, Senior Judge, Philadelphia Municipal Court. Judge Robbins, thank you so much for coming in today and participating in this project, which is designed to preserve the rich history of the Philadelphia Municipal Court. Now, before we get to your tenure on the court, we'd like to get some background on you. So why don't you take us back to the beginning? Where were you born, your parents, your siblings? Tell us about your formative years.
Okay. Actually, I spent my entire life in Philadelphia. I was born in Philadelphia. My early years, I lived in the Oxford Circle, which is in the northeast part of the city. I guess when I was around 12, we moved to Abington Township, where I went to high school. Not long after that, I went to Drexel here in the city for engineering. Shortly around that time, I moved to Fox Chase, then to Center City, then to the Fairmount area where we lived for many years. And finally now we're in the Overbrook area. Mm-hmm. Oxford Circle, which people may know, my parents told me there was all farmland at that time. Right. So we're talking about 1945.
Okay.
So it's a long time ago.
Okay. So where did you attend school? Elementary school?
Elementary school. Well, I went to Carnell Elementary School,
okay,
which was in the Oxford Circle. Then I went to two of the Abington schools, junior high and high school. Then I went to Drexel, where I majored in mechanical engineering, and I became a mechanical engineer. I was an engineer for a few years.
Well, let's go back to Abington, junior high and high school.
Right.
Any activities while you were there?
I was. It's going back a lot of years.
Yes.
I remember doing work with the newspaper, a little bit with wrestling, believe it or not. But it's too many years ago, unfortunately.
But then Drexel, and
right.
You become a mechanical engineer.
Right.
While you were at Drexel, they have the co-op program. So
right.
Tell us about that.
That was actually very, very valuable, very useful. I did 3 or 4 rotations in different companies, and you learn far more working in
mm-hmm.
those 3 months or 6 month segments than you did in actual classwork, mm-hmm. And it was all practical work. And I really thought that I was going to be an engineer for my entire life.
Right.
It was a total accident that I became a lawyer, and a total accident that I became a judge.
Well, you leave Drexel. You're a mechanical engineer.
Right.
How does your career begin?
Well, actually, I went to work at that point for Philco Ford.
Okay.
And only because you're over 30 do you know Philco. People under 30,
That's
never
right.
heard of Philco.
That's right.
But in those days, there was a Philco television in every home. There was a Philco radio in every Ford Motor Company car. It was actually Philco Ford at that point. And I went to work for them, and in the high-tech kind of area, where we were building air-to-air missiles, and we were building miniature computers. Mm-hmm. In those days, a miniature computer meant that we could fit it into a railroad boxcar.
Wow.
And to be honest with you, that was a real task to get it into a railroad boxcar. So that was a really great experience.
And how long were you doing that?
How did I enjoy it?
How long were you
doing that? About 3-4 years.
Okay.
4 years. And while I was there, one of the fellows I was working with was going to Temple Law School at night. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And he said, well, why don't you give it a try? Why don't you go to law school at night? And I had no interest in law.
Okay.
I didn't know any lawyers. Certainly didn't know any judges.
Right.
But I figured, well, I could use it as a big good background for what I wanted to do. And what I wanted to do was be an engineer and build things and market things and go into business of engineering. So I tried law school, and well, it was fine. And I got into it more and more, and I got so far into it, it was too late to quit, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I was going to law school at night, and Philco was wonderful. I mean, they paid for most of it.
Is that right?
They paid for most of it. And then I graduated, and by chance, a friend of mine who was in law school with me heard of an opening for a law clerk for Judge Richard Klein.
Okay.
I don't know if you remember Richard
I
Klein?
do.
You do?
Yes.
Okay. He became a Superior Court judge.
Right.
He was a Common Pleas Court judge, became a Superior Court judge. Now he's retired. And he was super bright. I mean, he
Yes.
was a brilliant, brilliant man. So he was very hard to keep up with. It was not easy. And then, by, again, luck, the same guy that I knew in law school said, you know what? Judge Glancy's looking for somebody. So I said, hey, I'm here.
Okay.
So I went and I talked to him. And it turns out he was an electrical engineer.
Is that right?
Yeah, nobody knows that.
No, I
He was an
didn't know
electrical
that.
engineer. So there were actually only 3 judges on the courts that started out as engineers. He, myself, and I think Judge Shepard.
Judge Blasi.
Judge Blasi? I don't know if he was a...
engineer for 20 years
He was an
before
engineer, okay.
before he went to undergraduate school.
Okay, oh wow, okay. So, there's not too many of us.
That's right.
But it was good background for even being a judge. It was really good.
Absolutely.
You're really disciplined as an engineer.
So you're at Philco Ford. You're going to Temple Law School at night.
Right.
You graduate from Temple. You pass the bar, and you begin the clerkship.
Right.
So you left Philco.
Yeah, I left Philco, of course.
Okay.
And went to work for Judge Glancy, and it was really just after the court was beginning. Municipal court was just beginning at that time, so only a couple years old. So I was in on, and I saw how lots of the rules and lots of the, they called them regulations, but just the way we did things was set up by him.
Mm-hmm.
And he would just, off the top of his head, say, hey, we got to do this, we have to do that. He'd write a memo, and that was the end of it, you know. No committees, nothing, you know. We just did it, and it worked that way for years and years and years.
Right.
And now we just pretty much follow the same protocol, same things.
Okay.
But it's amazing how, I mean, there was so little protocol in those days, and now it's grown to be so big, and there's so much. And of course, then there were only there's 7 judges
Right.
at the time.
That's
And
right.
now it's grown, I think, to 25 or more.
Okay.
Judges, you know.
Okay.
So
So you're clerking for Judge Glancy. Is
Right.
that what spiked your interest in becoming a judge?
It really was. I mean, after a few years, I was talking to him, and I said, you know, boy, I'd love to be a judge, you know.
Mhm.
And he says, why don't you run for election? And I said, no, I can't run. You know, I don't know anything. He said, why don't you try? So I tried, and I lost.
Mm-hmm.
So a few years later, I tried again, and I lost. A few years later, I tried again, and I won.
Third time was the
third time
charm.
was the charm. By that time, the people knew me, because after you do it 3 times, you know everybody. And by that time, I was also appointed by the governor at the time.
Okay.
So I was that made it a lot easier.
Right.
So
Right.
and then I became a judge, and I'm now in my 33rd year.
Wonderful.
It's going to be 34 years
That's
before
just,
you know it.
That's wonderful. So tell us about your tenure on the municipal court. You are appointed by the governor.
Right.
So you ran as a sitting judge.
Right.
But when you came onto the municipal court, what was it like?
It was actually much harder than it is today.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, it was at the time when Judge Papadakis was head of the Supreme Court.
Okay.
I don't know if you remember him.
I do.
You do. And at the time, we had, you know, an astoundingly large inventory, we'll call it.
Right.
A lot of cases to do, backlog. And he said every case has to be disposed of the day you hear it, the day that it's listed, every single case.
Wow.
and it was really a very difficult situation.
Okay.
And I can't remember who the DA was at the time, whether it was like in '86. Was that, I don't know if it was Sprague or Lynn Abraham had come on by then. But the DAs at that time fought you on everything. There were no special courts. There was no breaks. Even Section 17, they'd fight you on. So everything was a battle. And of course, defense counsel, everything was a motion. Now people seem to work together more.
Mm-hmm.
They seem more concerned about, the public and the defendant. There's programs for lots of things, and the smaller things they're not going after quite as much. They're being careful as they allocate the resources. So it's a lot different.
Right.
It's actually a lot easier now.
That's wonderful.
It's a lot easier. Yeah.
So, tell us about the transition. You started on the court when it was in its early stages,
right.
And now it's 34 years later. You're,
right.
So, tell us how the court has transitioned from when you first started.
Well, in part, it's just a lot larger.
The number of judges.
Now we have so many judges. We have like 25. I don't know how many. I think there's 25 regular judges and a few senior judges. And of course, now there's rules on everything. What's admissible and what's not admissible has become, actually, to me, much more difficult.
Okay.
I mean, before we used to follow the rules of evidence. What the rules of evidence were, we would follow them just like we were doing a trial. We would follow them. Now, just recently, I'm going to guess 5 or 10 years ago, the Supreme Court said, no, you have to let everything in, just a lot of things in, and you bend the rules a little bit. So it's a real problem deciding, where do you bend and where don't you bend?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the counties have been a lot more liberal than we have been.
Okay.
So to that extent, it's become more difficult.
All right.
I think. So.
During your tenure, what would you say you're proudest of your accomplishments as a municipal court judge?
It's funny. I don't know that there's anything that I'm proudest of. I really feel like.
Well, you must be proud of 34 years.
Yeah, I just feel like that I've been fair to people,
mm-hmm.
and people feel that they've gotten a fair hearing and a fair trial
and that's
in
important.
every case. And I feel like people go away, feeling that they've gotten treated fairly and with respect.
Mm-hmm.
And I really think that that's all people are looking for.
Right.
Even if you rule against them. I mean, I've had people say thank you, even when you rule against them, I've also had attorneys, object, and I rule in their favor, and they still argue and say, no, I ruled in your favor. A lot of funny things happen.
Yeah,
a lot of funny things.
That is true. So tell us about some of your mentors as you were going through your law school, engineering, your time on the bench.
Oh, wow. I mean, I've had, many. In engineering, the people I worked with were great. They showed me different things. They fought with me. But for the most part, they went along with what I was saying. You'd have to explain things to them. In law, there were lots of judges that helped me. I remember going to Judge Conroy.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I just came on the bench, I had one really hard case that went on for days. And I went and talked to him. He gave me some clues. We had some really good judges, Conroy, Judge Margiotti, Judge Glancy,
right,
that were really helpful in giving me some direction, which was good.
Mm-hmm.
So.
If you were going to be speaking to a group of new judges, what advice would you give them?
Oh, that's hard. I think one is just understand where the people are coming from. that a lot of people haven't had easy lives. Try to understand what they're saying. Remember that there's two sides of the story. I mean, I've had so many cases where I listen to the first side and say, oh boy, this guy's really the right side. We're going to rule for him. Then you hear the other side,
right.
And boy, hey, this guy is right. And then you have to figure out which one is right, and just try to, be nice to everybody is what I would tell them. I think
that's sound advice.
Yeah.
Do you feel that the practice of law has changed since the time that you first started?
Probably has.
And
it has, yeah.
How would you say it has changed?
Well, I do think people were more respectful of one another.
Mm-hmm.
The attorneys were more respectful of the other attorney. They were more respectful of the court and the judge and their clients, which is probably the most important part. I really feel like a lot of times the attorneys, first of all, they haven't even talked to their client, or sometimes they haven't really discussed everything with them, and they don't have the respect for the client I think that they should, which I think was lost. I think the old days there was more of that.
That's so true.
Yeah.
Is there anything that maybe I haven't asked you that you'd like to share with us about your time on the municipal court?
No. I think you've pretty well covered it. I don't know if you want me to tell you about my family and that kind of thing. Or,
we want to know about your
background.
background.
Know about me,
Yeah, we want to know your history.
Okay. I guess I'm married and have 2 kids. My wife is a sweetheart. She really is. We met in around 1973. We finally got married in 1981. So we were on and off for a number of years. Then we had 2 kids. Which is kind of interesting. One of my kids, my daughter, became a doctor. She's a doctor. My wife's a pediatrician. My daughter became a pediatrician.
Wonderful.
And my son is an engineer. And of course, I was originally an engineer. And he's actually doing the things that I thought I would be doing, that I want to do. I mean, he's actually making things, building things, running businesses, which is what I thought I would do.
Right.
But he's not yet married, doesn't have kids, and I keep telling him it's a lot easier now. Do it now, because once you're married and you have kids, it's a lot harder, and you have responsibilities, and you have to worry about meeting your obligations and things. So that was good.
Yeah, you're not trying to get him to go to law school.
No. He would never go to law school, and I keep on saying I really do think. I'll give this advice to anyone that's listening, is that engineering and the sciences is probably the only good field left. You go into medicine, and I have to say I know lots of doctors. They're not happy, especially the way it's become big business for doctors.
Right.
And lawyers. I mean, most of the lawyers are not happy that I know. It's become very, very difficult. Whereas science and engineering, I think it's a great field. Because I enjoy it. My heart is still in engineering. I still love to do, build things, do things, read about scientific things. I spend most of my time reading about engineering and technical things, more so than even law. So
okay. Are you building things now?
I'm sure I'm always building something little, but usually it's just something to get me out of a little problem that I have.
What kinds of things are you building these days?
Geez, I don't know what I'm building these days, but it's always something. It's always something.
All right.
It's always something.
Well, thank you so much, Judge. This has
pleasure.
been wonderful. We appreciate your assisting us in this valuable project.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.